from our first presenter. And our first presenter today is Dr. Renee Prokopavicius, and she is from the Hawkesbury Institute for the Environment. And the title of her talk today is Keeping Australian Cities Green in a 50 centigrade Celsius world.
What do you have planned for this weekend? I'm willing to bet that you want to take advantage of the beautiful Sydney spring days by going for a long walk in your neighborhood or heading to the local beer garden for a sunny meal outdoors. Maybe you want to meet friends and family at the park for a barbie. I love spending time outdoors in the green spaces around us. City parks and street trees are important for mental health, exercise, and recreation, but they also play a critical role in keeping our cities cool. Trees can cool city streets by 7 to 15 degrees Celsius through shading and the process of transpiration, or water loss from tree leaves. But Earth's climate is warming, resulting in more frequent and more intense heat waves. Just last summer, new records were set in Western Sydney as air temperatures surpassed 50 degrees Celsius. When summer heat waves coincide with drought periods, the combination of hot and dry weather creates a perfect storm that challenges the health of our urban forest. Some commonly planted species failed to survive last summer and may soon become unsuitable. Current planting practices will need to be adjusted to favor selection of more tolerant plant species. I'm a plant ecophysiologist at the Hawkesbury Institute for the Environment, and I study how plants respond to a warming climate. For the past 3 years, I've worked on the Which Plant Where project, a large project between Western Sydney University and Macquarie University that's funded by Hort Innovation and the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. Our project goal is to identify both tolerant and vulnerable horticultural plant species to inform urban planners and help build more resilient, climate-ready cities. I designed and executed a series of standardized glasshouse experiments to expose over 100 different plant species to the combination of experimental heat and drought stress. We measured a set of plant functional traits that enabled us to rank species according to their physiological tolerance. Our tolerance rankings are now summarized in a fact sheet that's available to any interested stakeholder. We also held a webinar for plant growers in the nursery and garden industry to identify a set of opportunity species that are rarely found in Australian cities, but are tolerant to stress. More detailed information will be provided at a national level as an interactive plant tool, allowing the selection of plant species against a range of filters, including our measured plant tolerance traits. This interactive database will be available to policymakers, plant growers, and city planners after its 2021 release date. Our trait-based approach shows great promise for screening large urban floras to identify which species are vulnerable and which are tolerant. Working with Penrith City Council, I conducted a case study last summer to verify that our measured plant functional traits were indeed related to patterns of dieback among commonly planted species. It was possible to predict the intolerant species that were likely to fail during extreme heat waves. For example, species with large leaves, such as the London plane tree pictured on this slide, or with low temperature tolerance, such as southern magnolia, had extensive dieback. These species are now preferred to provide either shade or showy flowers, but they require more water to survive extreme heat stress. With ongoing funding from the Australian Research Council, I'll continue to measure the water requirements of different tree species during heat waves. This information can be used to support water-sensitive urban designs that will conserve our water resources while maintaining a green canopy throughout summer. Traditionally, urban tree selection has been based on popular aesthetic traits such as glossy green leaves or autumn color. Instead, our research can be used to select trees based on ecosystem services, such as urban cooling or enhanced biodiversity. Trait-based species selection practices can be used to increase both the tolerance and the diversity of Australia's urban forests. The concrete jungle is ever expanding, stretching to home about 2/3 of the human population by 2050. We will have to work together to create more sustainable cities that will remain green and livable as our climate warms.
Today is from Declan Cush, and Declan is from the Institute for Culture and Society, and the title of his talk today is The Power of Social Science, Electrifying Community Engaged Futures. And Declan is joining us by Zoom as well.
Thanks very much. So I'm excited to build on the work of my colleagues right here at ICS and the Cooling the Commons project. And I want to start by redirecting your attention away from me and to think about the electricity needed to power the systems around you, the laptops that connect us right now, air conditioning systems that are cooling your body, hot water systems that will refresh you tonight. Now, previous generations could not have imagined the stable energy supply powering our neighborhoods, factories, and offices that we mostly take for granted. And this stability is a product of all of the engineering expertise and technology that Australians have invested in. Thousands upon thousands of poles, wires, and substations that give us the cool homes, hot water, and digital connection that we enjoy every day. But the challenge we now face is maintaining this stability as we transition from a 20th century energy system powered by coal to one powered by wind and solar and batteries. Building the next generation of renewable power stations, pictured here on the bottom left, we need to think differently about end users. And to ease this transition, Australia needs my social science expertise. Now, I've already personally witnessed part of this transition. I grew up in the shadow of Munmora Power Station on the central coast of New South Wales, and I witnessed its decline in the 2000s when I returned there to work as a postdoc, and I took this photo of it up in the top left here. I saw the pride that workers felt having built what really were the cathedrals of 20th century society, albeit ones mostly hidden from public view. My job was to understand the community's acceptance of the power station as an experimental site for carbon capture, part of a transition its owners embarked on in a bid to stay relevant a decade ago. My research helped engineers recognise that in addition to legal approvals, also gaining a social licence would be necessary for the project's success. And I've carried this lesson forward. My current project shows citizen engagement, approval, and trust are key ingredients in ensuring a good energy future. And this is because we'll need a lot of us to allow our batteries, air conditioners, and electric car charging to be orchestrated automatically by the next generation of power companies. Now, I'm passionate about bringing citizens and energy users to the center of decision-making about how we'll do all this. And this is why I'm leading the Social License to Automate Annex through a new International Energy Agency technology collaboration program. This work brings insights from trials across Australia to a global network I've built over recent years. And this network coordinates findings from policies and trials in such places as Austria, Norway, and Texas, places where thousands of users are helping to shape their own energy futures. And together we're democratizing questions like how can we cool the commons and avoid building costly infrastructure that would only be used for a few hours of a year. This global network is incredibly valuable because in Australia, we're operating in a very low trust environment. Energy Consumers Australia finds that only 35% of consumers, on average, trust that the system is actually working in their long-term interest. And this is why it's so important to help build community capacity. Nothing about us without us. Now, we're halfway through this 2-year project, and already we're seeing positive impact. Our early recommendations about citizen participation in project design are being taken up by key government bodies, such as the Australian Energy Market Operator, who are supporting integrating social science into research and pilots. And this is an important victory for citizens and energy consumers who are often excluded from planning decisions. Putting technology in their hands, empowering them, and rebuilding trust might all sound abstract, but we're facing another scorching summer. And the tools to help citizens engage with energy system change that I'm building in this project will help me work with colleagues across WSU to keep Western Sydney cool and livable during future heat waves. I'm especially helping to position cool living as a public good and put private air conditioning in its rightful place. Secure, happy, healthy cities will need stable electricity systems. And together we can help to ensure that the benefits of society's investments in the power stations of the future can flow to citizens in a way that we're all proud of. Thank you.
Today is from the Marx Institute for Brain, Behaviour and Development. Celia Harris today is going to speak to us on the topic of creating environments that support memory. Celia.
Thank you. So we know that elderly people are at risk of loneliness and social isolation that can speed up cognitive decline. And this is particularly the case with the recent pandemic, where we've seen that elderly people are isolated from their family and friends, unable to have visitors. I'm a cognitive scientist who does research on memory, and I study the way that internal memory processes are supported or enhanced by our external environment, especially for people who are older or who are experiencing cognitive declines. In one current project, I'm working with an aged care partner, the Whitten Group, to create enhanced social environments in aged care that can better support memory and cognition. To create these richer environments, I'm drawing on a decade of research that I've done to understand what good supportive memory conversations can look like. In my prior work, I've examined how people remember together in different kinds of groups. And many of my studies have focused on one special kind of group, older couples, such as the couple pictured on my slide at their dining table participating in my research. Older couples are special because they have long relationships, often spanning decades. They know each other very well, and they're also often concerned about possible memory declines as they age. In my research, I've compared how individuals within these couples remember separately versus together. And I've shown that unlike pairs of strangers, these couples' memory performance is transformed when they collaborate. They recall much more together than they do separately, and they're able to cue each other and remind each other of things that neither one would have remembered alone. The transcript displayed on the slide provides a short excerpt from a conversation I recorded between a husband and wife in their 70s, married for 50 years, where the husband had a diagnosis of dementia. I asked them to talk about a recent trip they had taken together to the Mona Art Gallery in Tasmania. As you can see at the outset of the conversation, the husband couldn't remember the event at all. But when his wife started to remind him of some of the details, and particularly when she mentioned the critical detail, Nell, it turns out he does remember, and he's able to recall some of his own details and contribute meaningfully to the conversation. By transcribing and coding the communication strategies that couples use, I've shown that successful reminiscing conversations are marked by particular features. Those couples who cue each other, who repeat each other, who finish each other's sentences are able to help each other to remember more. And in contrast, those who correct each other or who have a designated expert actually hinder each other's remembering. So this research shows that memory benefits from conversation with close others who are able to provide reminders and who use these particular kinds of helpful communication strategies. But what about people who aren't in the company of their spouse of 50 years? Working with the Whitten Group, I'm discovering how we can use this knowledge to create environments in aged care that can make interactions like this happen. Maybe where people don't have close family and friends available to them, and where the most frequent day-to-day social interactions happen with nursing staff. I'm taking the lessons learned from the range of good communication strategies that couples engaged in naturally and examining whether we can train aged care nurses to use some of these same strategies to support residents' memories and have better conversations with them. So the training focuses on a series of practical, specific conversational tools, and then we go on and track conversations over time and give feedback as nurses practice engaging in these richer reminiscing. We follow residents' cognitive and emotional health over time to examine the impact of the enriched social environment. In a second project with global technology company NTT in a partnership with Deakin University, I'm working to develop technological tools to enhance conversation for people living with dementia in the community. I began this project by conducting deep stakeholder engagement to understand the most pressing needs expressed by people living with dementia and their carers. And I found a common theme described was, again, the loneliness and social isolation that's experienced by people living with dementia, how to ensure that they can maintain social contact with loved ones, even as they experience some cognitive and physical impairments. So we're working together with NTT to develop new technologies designed to be user-friendly for people with dementia that they can use to connect them with their family members, to facilitate joint reminiscing, and to give them prompts and supports to boost their memory performance. We're in the early stages now of developing these concepts and building them into prototypes, but we have the ultimate goal of bringing these new products to market so that people can actually buy them and use them. These projects are exciting because they represent ways in which you can take the findings all the way from controlled laboratory cognitive science experiments out into the world and actually influence aged care practice or products on the market to reduce social isolation and support memory for people who need it most. Thank you.
Our next speaker today is Caroline E, and she is from NICM, National Institute for Complementary Medicine. The topic of her talk today, of Caroline's talk, is Western Sydney Integrative Health, a co-designed model of care.
I'll never forget one of the first patients I saw as a medical student. She was a woman in a wheelchair with metastases to her spine, and she had rejected medical treatment for her cancer. Instead, she chose green lip mussel supplements. Complementary therapies like green lip mussels are used by 2 out of 3 Australians. Unfortunately, many doctors will have similar stories to mine. But on the other hand, many of these treatments are safe and now hold evidence for improving quality of life in chronic disease. And we all know that conventional medicine doesn't always have all the answers. But how do we balance the risks and rewards of using complementary therapies? Let me paint you a different picture to the one we started off with. With 1 Australian diagnosed with cancer every 4 minutes, you may have cared for a loved one or lived through cancer treatment yourself. What if gentle and safe therapies delivered by a highly skilled practitioner could have brought you joy, hope, and healing alongside your medical treatment? What if you or your loved one could have received acupuncture for nausea, oncology massage to ease fatigue and pain, and yoga to encourage gentle movement? And the potential benefits for these treatments extends beyond cancer. 1 in 3 of us will live with chronic disease, 1 in 5 with chronic pain. And in Western Sydney, our incidence of diabetes is 20% higher than in the rest of New South Wales. And yet treatments like mindfulness, yoga therapy, acupuncture and Tai Chi show promise in helping to treat metabolic disorders, as well as mental health and chronic pain, and improving the lived experience of having a chronic illness. But the question is, how can these therapies and indeed therapists work safely within our healthcare system? The answer lies in integrative healthcare, which combines the best of Western medicine and evidence-based traditional and complementary therapies. So I had a vision to set up an academic integrative healthcare centre at Western, and I used a research method called community-based participatory design to co-design this model of care with key stakeholders. And I personally undertook more than 60 instances of stakeholder engagement. I spoke to clinicians and consumer groups, organisations like the Australian Centre for Innovation. And I hold focus groups with our community, and this is how the centre got its name. Initially, we called it the Westmead Clinic, but the community said that Westmead reminded them of terrible parking, and clinic made them feel like they were having a colonoscopy. So they named our centre Western Sydney Integrative Health. And I interviewed GPs and medical specialists in Western Sydney, and this is what I found. A service like this is very much needed due to our high rates of chronic disease. We shouldn't compromise on the quality or safety of our care, nor on evidence. We should ensure equity of access for the underserved, and a team-based approach is preferred where practitioners work together and communicate with patients' existing doctors. Western Sydney Integrative Health opens early next year, and it offers general practice integrated with Chinese medicine, yoga therapy, mindfulness, Tai Chi and oncology massage, all delivered by highly credentialed experts. Now, this is the first academic integrative healthcare centre in Australia, and as a result, NICM has just been awarded the first Australian membership of the prestigious Academic Consortium for Integrative Medicine and Health. We're in good company with fellow members including Harvard University and the Mayo Clinic. So with our evidence-based therapies, we're able to help people feel better so that they can move more and eat better. And in this way, our rates of chronic disease will start to drop and tens of thousands of patients will be able to find relief from debilitating symptoms like fatigue and pain from illnesses like cancer. And this will also benefit thousands of carers. I've also secured almost $250,000 in philanthropic funding to provide free services so that we can treat everyone, regardless of ability to pay. And almost $500,000 to establish a patient registry, tracking health outcomes for 10 years, linking to Medicare and hospital data so that we can understand the impact of what we're doing from research in a real-world setting. Last year, my team and I received a grant to provide free acupuncture, yoga, and oncology massage to people with cancer in Western Sydney. And here are some of the things our patients said. A person diagnosed with cancer cannot heal alone. Thanks so much. I have hope again. It gives me great joy in difficult times to be able to attend sessions at the clinic. I'm leading this research so that I can continue to bring joy, hope, and healing to Western Sydney and my model of integrative healthcare to the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Our fifth presenter today is Dr. Ali Al-Ashwal. He's from, is Ali here? He's from the School of the Built Environment, and the title of his talk is The Correlation Between Weather and Suicide Rate of Construction Workers.
Do you know what's the deadliest job in Australia for men? Construction industry has the highest rate of suicide and mental health compared with other sectors. And the number of suicide rates in construction is accounted for about 200 lives every year lost due to self-harm and suicide. If you are a construction worker, there is a chance, 6% chance that you will die due to suicide rather than accidents. And young construction workers have 2.5 times more likely to die due to suicide rather than other accidents. Last year, I attended the first Constructathon in Australia that's called Construction Hackathon. And the first issue that was highlighted by the practitioners was suicide. So I'm sorry first to bring up this dark topic, but there is a need to conduct more research and to highlight this issue further. Because the losses are not just on the families of the descendants, but also affecting the whole sector. This issue has been observed in other countries, such as the USA, the UK, Canada, and Greece. So it's kind of global phenomenon. There are many studies that have been conducted in relation to the causes of suicide among construction workers. And these studies highlighted three main possible causes. First one is work-related causes, such as job stress, social factors, such as untreated previous psychological illnesses, separation, and lastly is the untreated previous illnesses. So weather was not mentioned as one of these triggering factors that contribute to suicide. However, we believe that weather is an important and significant contributor to suicide among construction workers for three reasons. First, weather has been observed to occur during certain seasons based on the literature from psychology field. Second, weather factors such as sunshine will have a direct impact on some hormones and chemicals in our body, such as melatonin and serotonin. Lastly, construction workers are working in open sites where they are fully exposed to different environmental factors. In fact, our initial results indicated that there is a correlation between the average maximum temperature and suicide rates based on yearly and secondary data. However, we need to collect more data in order to be able to confirm this result. We have conducted initial contact with the National Coronial Institution Information System in order to collect data related to the number of suicide rates of construction workers during the past 20 years. And we also initiated a contact with the Bureau of Meteorology Australia to collect weather data such as sunshine rates and average temperature changes during the same period. And we will be able then to correlate these two factors to find if there is any influence of or changes of suicide rates based on the weather factors. It's expected that our result will have change in the current practices of construction sites, especially safety procedures and the method of conducting work on sites. There have been some initiatives in Australia to overcome this problem, such as Mates in Construction. And our research will help to ensure the effectiveness of these programs and will save a considerable amount of lives of human beings. Along with this saving of lives, it's expected that there will be also considerable amount of life saved as a result of this research. And for us, the most important and valuable outcome is to save human lives. Thank you very much.
To move to our sixth presenter today. This will be a presentation by Zoom. This is from Dr. Michael Lewin. He's from the School of Business. And Michael's topic today is the perfect employee. Can social robots fulfill the dream? Michael.
Have you ever been in a hotel or a restaurant where the staff was just having a bad day and your issues are none of their issues? Well, social robots are perfect employees in the service industry because they can deliver a quality service. And this research explores consumers' attitudes towards social robots. A study in the Scientific American measured the efficiency of energy usage for various species on the planet. Guess which animal was the most efficient in terms of the energy usage to move 1 kilometer? You guessed it, it was the condor. Where do humans rank on that list? Surprisingly, we ranked about a third of the way down the list. This research also examined a man on a bicycle in terms of their energy use. And excuse my pun here, it blew the condor out of the park. Well, guys, what I'm trying to say here is as innovations get better, we become more efficient with our energy usage. Think about the progression from the bicycle to the car and the computers to the internet. Our next jump in technological advancement is from the internet to social robots. The use of social robots in the service industry will help improve the use of our energy as demonstrated in the picture here. Now we can focus our energy on more value-added activities and less time on repetitive tasks. The research answers the gap in the industry also. Can robots provide the same quality as humans? Are robots reliable? Are they responsive to consumers? To understand this question, the researchers developed a model known as ServBot. It measures the social robot service quality. Some of you may have had a bad experience at hotels and they ask you to fill out a survey, whether you were dissatisfied or not. Well, this research extends on that method. It allows businesses to measure the actual performance of the social robot in that service industry. So what is a social robot? Social robots are autonomous robots that interact and communicate with humans or other agents. Essentially, it's a robot that engages with the consumer and listens to his commands. The problem for Australia and many of the Western countries is that we have an aging population. We have a smaller proportion of younger workers, and the cost of an employee is going up every single year. It is predicted that 35% of Australian population will be age above 75-year-old by 2047. Therefore, we need alternative solutions to the shortage of workers in Australia. Think about remote areas in Australia. I'm from WA, so in Pilbara, there's a huge shortage of workers. The social robots can fulfill the gap by providing and servicing repetitive tasks, such as taking orders or delivering orders or assisting the sick, as you can see in the photo here. My research shows that consumers perceive social robot service quality to be very similar to the human service quality. That result has a significant impact on the business community. The impact is that it can help many of the small business owners free up their time. Repetitive tasks such as stacking crates or taking orders can now be completed by social robots. By freeing up their time, it will also help them focus on more value-added activities such as designing or decorating cakes and bouquets. Having a time to be creative and to think about new business ventures will help generate new jobs and opportunity for New South Wales and Australia as a whole. Currently, I'm working with Thrive. It's an organization that helps migrants start up their business in Australia. And due to COVID-19, many of these businesses have struggled to access their employees. As a result, many of them can't operate. So we are looking at exploring methods to implement the social robot in front counters, front service desks, so that they can remain open for business. We are also collaborating with many schools and medical centers to explore how we can integrate social robots. The potential impact of this research is highly significant. A social robot can be used in many industries such as hotel, restaurants, hospitals, schools, banks, airports, regional and capital cities in Australia. This research will benefit Australia as a whole as we become more efficient in our service delivery, and it will help us create more jobs. Furthermore, it will also help us with people that are in physically demanding roles, such as the photos that you have here. This research has identified new ways on how we can deliver service to a customer in the future. Thank you.
We best move on. So our next presentation is from Dr. Anupama Ganeeg, and Anu is from the School of Computer, Data and Mathematical Sciences, and her presentation today is titled Fully Online Interventions for Dementia Clinical Trials, or Maintain Your Brain.
Thank you. Dementia is a dark disease where patients feel lost among their loved ones and sometimes in their own homes. Diseases leading up to dementia, like Alzheimer's, has a long onset time and an equally long drawn decline period. Research involving such diseases require thousands of participants to engage in the activities over many years. Engaging that many participants and engaging them for that long, and especially if they have to visit clinics, can be very costly for a research project. So this is the problem to solve. How do we engage thousands of participants for years and years in dementia research without costing us that much of money? But here's the twist. I'm not a clinician. I'm an IT person. How can an IT person solve this problem? So I was invited to find a solution to this problem by a pioneer set of dementia researchers in Australia from UNSW, Sydney University, Universities of Monash and Melbourne, in an NHMRC funded grant that was worth $6 million to find how we can engage thousands of participants in a very cost-effective way in a research project. The project was named Maintain Your Brain. Maintain Your Brain is a unique trial there where we have 4 types of interventions intervening in people's life in an online fashion under 4 modules as mentioned in the slide. The 4 modules are changes to physical activities that they do, a Mediterranean food-based diet, cognitive training with video games, and treatment for anxiety and depression. Maintain Your Brain, as I said, is a fully online trial that has a 1-year intervention period and a 4-year follow-up period. Currently, the Maintain Your Brain trial has over 6,000 participants, and they're in their 3rd year of follow-up. And we collect over 50 million data points. This makes Maintain Your Brain really the first and the largest world dementia trial in the world. Our team at Western Sydney has University designed, architected, and developed this system. And it is a bespoke solution that facilitates the extendable nature of the trials and also facilitates real-time integration with other systems, a few other systems from around the world. Some of these systems are located in New York, Canada, St. Vincent's Hospital, and ANU in Canberra. This Maintain Your Brain system also has taken into consideration of the age group that we are engaging in, 55 to 75, and we have created a platform that is very engaging for them. The success of Maintain Your Brain project was recently captured in media. And not only that, this online trial delivery system has attracted other researchers who are doing similar kind of research. For example, a group of researchers who are doing all the Australian twins study that analyzes the brain function of all the Australians have adapted this trial management system into their trial. Most importantly, over the last 7 months, due to the COVID pandemic, when most of the clinical trials were affected, both Maintain Your Brain and all the Australian twin study continued. Not only they continued, the participation rate in these trials have increased over that period. IT people like myself, who work behind the scene solving problems, often wonder whether what we do make a difference. And in fact, I've demonstrated here a well-executed IT system, how it can support clinical research and make a difference in the world. As an IT person, I feel honored to be part of this research and making an impact. And also finally to all those hardworking IT personnel and to those data scientists who are doing data analysis. I'm here to say that what we make can make a difference. Thank you.
This presentation today is from Jacqueline Duarte. Dr. Duarte is from the School of Education, and the title of her talk today is Exploring Linguistic Repertoires with Teachers and Young People in Diverse Classrooms.
Thank you. In the 21st century, the global movement of people has increased linguistic and cultural diversity all over the world. In Australia, 120 surviving Indigenous languages have been joined by more than 200 languages spoken by Australians, 20% of Australians who speak another language other than English at home. This diversity is recognised in many Western and Southwestern Sydney classrooms. And a key tenet of educational theory is to recognise what students bring and then build on that in service of learning. So how do we think about the rich linguistic skills our students bring to the classroom? How do we harness them in our classrooms and then build on them? The research that I'm sharing here was conducted in partnership with the New South Wales Department of Education, and we have worked with over 1,000 young people in Western and Southwestern Sydney in age 5 to 15 years old. And in this project, young people are studying themselves. Rather than conducting research on children, research was conducted by children. They collected information about themselves, what languages they were speaking, when, where, and in what context, who they were doing it with, and in what kind of environments. They learned to be researchers, interviewing each other, collecting their data, analysing it and presenting it to their teachers. You can see on my slide here, we've got a pie graph that was produced by one of the groups of students in one of their classrooms, sharing the linguistic diversity of their room. And you can also see here what we call language maps, which is a research method and a researching tool that's had much resonance in this project, where teachers represent their linguistic lives. I've got 2 maps by Tyler, age 10, and Amira, age 7. And you can see up here, this vivid, exciting life is outside of school, and the red box is school. And there's no relationship between these 2 things. One of the things we tried to do in this project was to try to bring these 2 worlds together. For Amira, doing this work, her teachers realized that she was a translator for her family. She had rich bilingual skills that they hadn't realized otherwise. And they were able to build on this in school, taking it up, and she became a peer support for other students. We think about the impact of this work on across the board. For students, they were able for the first time to show their teachers what they knew and can do. Our research showed that students did not see the skill inherent in being multilingual at all. And so we were able to recognize and actually get them to reflect on this. They also developed confidence in themselves, and the idea that they started to think about home language and using home language, and they were able to build and extend not only their first language, but use that to learn and build English. For teachers, they were able to create lessons and activities across subject areas and meet outcomes by building on the knowledge that their children were presenting them. They also, in every case, increased the complexity of the tasks that they assigned students in their classrooms as well. And they made relationships with parents and learned much more that they hadn't realized before. For parents, it encouraged them to come into school. They were sharing the skills that they had. Many of the schools instituted a bilingual reading program where parents were guest readers and community readers. Parents expressed quite often that this meant so much more to them than the actual Harmony Day that they were involved in usually every day at their school. They were able to share their skills. They were thrilled by the fact that their children suddenly got excited about first language, and enrollments in home language practice in home language school classrooms and Saturday schools increased. Across the board for education, this has been taken up in schools in New South Wales, in South Australia and in Victoria, and in classrooms in Canada, the US, Hong Kong, and South Africa. It's been included in best practice handbooks for working with multilingual students produced by the Erasmus Foundation, by the British Council, and by the Irish Human Rights Commission. Going forward, we're doing this research with pre-service teachers. As a teacher educator and language and literacy researcher myself, I'm interested in how we build on our pre-service teachers' capacity and how that can be used in service of classrooms. I closed my presentation with the words of Sharma, a student in our project. I want people to know my language. If they know my language, they will know me better. My language is in my heart and my head.
Okay, our ninth presenter today, and we are over halfway, is Dr. Leo Zhang. He's from the School of Engineering, and the title of his talk is Design of Additive Manufacturing for Biomedical Applications. Over to you, Leo.
Thank you. You may have heard about additive manufacturing, or you are more familiar with another name, 3D printing, which is more often used in the media and also the general public. So what's the difference between 3D printing and the traditional manufacturing? So in traditional manufacturing, when we start with a block of materials, we can cut off what we don't want. This is caused like a considerable limitation to what we can design. The customization is either entirely limited or minimized in order to reduce the cost. On the other hand, for 3D printing, it can take a 3D scanning data, and then the printer can take these informations. So from that, we can deposit or fuse the materials together layer by layer in order to make the final part. So here's the key. The part I made by using 3D printer, we can get the highly customized product without adding additional cost. So the pictures here are the implants in biomedical applications. We can build this like a customized implants that is perfectly fit for our patients. Like if for one case study, I want to show you, you can see that the figure on your right-hand side, it was a patient with almost 70 years old. She got the bone cancer on the jaw. So what we did is to recreate this portion of the jaw to support this like the patient, and then we can bring all this like the information to the surgeon. So it will be match the design functionalities of the previous one. So finally, for the 3D printing, actually it has a huge impact for it being able to create some like the specialization product. And also like we can create something that is like the patient specific. Why? If you look at the people on your left or right, you will see that we are all the difference. We are all the individuals. So in my research, the aim of my research was number one, understanding the effect of 3D printing parameters. Number two, design for optimal structures for ensuring long service life. Number three, we try to develop new methodologies, try to reduce the manufacturing time and also the cost. So publishing some like the papers or applying some fund was actually a small part of my research impact. As an early career researcher, I'm happy to address 4 areas of my research engagement and impact. The first one, international. Actually, it will provide Australia a great opportunities for development of the additive manufacturing technologies. And also, it will, like the project will be targeted on advanced manufacturing areas. And another thing is like it will also benefit on the health. So that means you can see for my research all related to the biomedical applications, it will be help our like health professionals and then provide a more reliable device. So from the international, actually by presenting some public lectures and presentation at the conferences, I will establish intensive collaborations with many international institutions. So actually with these like the results, will also help the people in the Pacific countries or Africa countries. And then for our communities, actually we use some like the social media, Twitter, try to like translate our research outcome to the general public. So with this like outcome, it will be serving our like the growing 3D printing societies and also benefit for our local users. And then for the industry, I've been involved in develop that like the tissue scaffold with the company named Algora like orthopedic companies through the ARC training center at UC. So the collaborations with the industry partners will help us to applying some like innovation connecting grants. And also finally, I want to like show you guys another figure about our recent research outcome. So for example, if we want to using the 3D ceramic printer to print one dental crown, so actually you can see the dental crown is in the small size, but initially like when start from the raw materials to the final product, it will be take 5 days. But with our optimal methodologies, we can like reduce it to 2 days. So it will be save our manufacturing time and thus saving our like the final cost. So actually my research is really cool. I'm excited about what I do now. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, our 10th presenter today is Dr. Freya McMillan. She's from the School of Health Sciences, and the title of her talk today is A New Dawn, Reducing the Impact of Diabetes in Pacifica Communities. Over to you, Freya.
I know what it's like to lose someone long before their time should be up. When I was just 19, my 21-year-old brother passed away after a car accident. My local community came together and raised over 60,000 in less than 6 months to buy hospital equipment so others could avoid similar loss. Community is powerful. My research harnesses the power of community to help individuals lead healthy lifestyles. The economic burden of type 2 diabetes in Australia is over $6 billion per year. And those with diabetes are burdened with a myriad of potential complications. For example, 10% of people with diabetes will develop end-stage kidney disease. And the cost of treating just 12 patients on kidney dialysis for 5 years is $5 million. Our intervention model cuts this cost by more than 50%. At $2 million, it will reach 4,600 people. to prevent diabetes and its complications. Whether you're preventing or managing diabetes, physical activity, a healthy diet, and a healthy weight are critical. Achieving at least 150 minutes of physical activity per week, eating a healthy diet, and reducing your weight by 7% reduces progression to diabetes by 58% over 3 years. And in those with diabetes, reduces overall mortality by 20%. Yet we all know how difficult it is to initiate and sustain these behaviors. There's strong evidence that people need a lot of support to do it. Having a peer, someone like you, is particularly effective. For underserved communities like the Samoan community in Australia, having people who they trust is key. They often feel alienated from healthcare, and they have some of the highest risk factors for diabetes. We developed a partnership with the Samoan community across Sydney. We formed a reference group to co-design and lead a research program aimed at reducing the impact of diabetes in this community. Through this, we identified churches with the perfect way to reach Samoans, as most Samoans go to church. Together, we developed a church-based program, Lataioa Afua, A New Dawn, which we piloted in 3 southwestern Sydney churches and 131 participants. To make the program scalable, we used a train the trainer approach, where a community activator trains volunteers within churches to deliver peer support to their church peers. Our intervention content is culturally tailored. It considers what Samoans eat and their interests. And it's based on 7 easy to implement diet and 5 physical activity messages. Things like drink more water, take more steps. Churches select how and when they want to focus on the messages. And the volunteers within churches deliver peer support sessions and other activities that align with the messages. Peer support sessions are based on sound theory, incorporating motivational interviewing and behavioral science. Peers select small steps that they focus on. They build plans, considering what might hinder and facilitate them in their behavior change to make goals achievable. And they review their progress and adjust goals accordingly. In our pilot, we identified that 96% of our population were overweight or obese. 32% had diabetes. In the background in Australia, it's 6%. 13% did not know they had diabetes until we collected their data. In terms of effectiveness, after only 3 to 8 months of intervention, average blood glucose control improved across the sample. That's in those with and without diabetes. The improvement in those with diabetes was as much as you would expect from taking an extra medication. And it would be resulting in a decrease in risk of diabetes complications of about 15%. Knowledge of diabetes improved, physical activity participation doubled, and low-fat diet choices improved. We had exceptional reach, with over 3/4 of all church attendees signing up to the program. We had high engagement in our training program, with 19% of our sample trained and delivering the church intervention. Implementation was highly successful, with over 110 intervention activities delivered in just the first year. We've seen high maintenance. The pilot churches are still running with this program over 2 years onwards. In 2019, we secured $4.5 million from the NHMRC and 13 partners to roll this program out more widely. More than 50 Pacifica churches across Sydney have signed up. In addition to measuring effectiveness, we will explore implementation processes. We'll look at the barriers and facilitators to rolling out the program and the moderators and mediators to its success. This will give us necessary data to develop implementation guidelines and a toolkit so community and health organisations can scale and disseminate our model across Australia and beyond. Our model can be adapted to any group. We've already started testing it in an inter-regional area where Aboriginal communities exist. Diabetes poses a significant burden to our healthcare system. A shift of focus away from medical approaches into community-based, scalable and sustainable approaches is essential. And we are leading the way in Australia in showing that peer support is the answer for underserved communities. Thank you.
Noakes, which means we're only about 9 minutes behind schedule. Sandy Noakes is from the School of Law, and the title of her talk is Social Media, Blurring the Line Between the Professional and the Personal.
This may seem like an obvious statement, but most of us don't have a lot in common with Israel Folau. We're not 6'4", we don't weigh over 100 kilos, and we haven't competed professionally in numerous football codes. Most importantly, we've never been employed on a multi-million-dollar contract that requires us to act as our employer's brand ambassador at all times. Many of us are familiar with the dispute between Folau and Rugby Australia that occurred last year over Folau's comments on social media relating to LGBTQI people and the resulting termination of his contract. My colleague, Dr. Sarah Hook, and I have researched the issue of an employer's legal right to control employee behaviour on social media outside of work. Our research has had impact because we haven't focused on Israel Folau. Instead, we've looked at the way the law about social media and work affects ordinary employees, those of us without a high profile. Social media blurs the line between our work and personal lives, particularly given that so many of us now live those personal lives in such a public way on social media. We analysed the existing case law and found that it fell into 3 categories. In the first 2 categories of case listed there on the slide, the law is clear. You can't disparage your employer on social media, and you cannot engage in inappropriate conduct towards your fellow employees or clients of your employer. The importance of our research was that it focused on a 3rd category of case, which we called damage by association. This is employee behaviour that doesn't fall into either of the first 2 categories, but might still damage the employer if the employee's connection to the employer is known. Our work here has had impact because there is no settled position on this type of case in Australia. We applied our analysis to a group of workers who have very little in common with Israel Folau, school teachers. We come across a headline about a teacher from Geelong Grammar who was being investigated for her membership of a private anti-vaccination group on Facebook. This got us thinking. There's a blurred line between school teachers' personal and professional lives because they are expected to be role models in our community. What is the position on their behaviour on social media, particularly in relation to this category 3 conduct? Should they have to protect their employer's reputation even when they're off the clock? This is an issue that affects over 280,000 teachers currently employed in Australian schools. Our research has made a practical difference because we applied our analysis to social media policies relating to school teacher conduct. We found that these policies sought to very tightly control teacher behaviour on social media outside of work. For example, they required teachers to control what their family and friends posted about them, and they also required teachers to report any negative comment about their school that they found on social media. In almost all cases, the policy stated that a breach of the policy by the teacher could result in disciplinary action, including dismissal. Given the breadth of these policies, this is somewhat alarming. We've engaged with the education sector in Australia in a number of ways about our research. Our research generated quite heated debate at the Anzella Education Forum. This is a forum attended by peak organisations in the Australian and New Zealand education sectors, both government and non-government, as well as unions that represent teachers. Quite unusually for law research, our findings have had cross-disciplinary impact, published recently in the Australian Journal of Education, a leading journal in the area of school education. And we're now working with the Independent Education Union that represents over 75,000 school teachers Australia-wide. We've recently published a guide to social media policies with the union to educate school teachers about their rights and obligations on social media. In terms of future impact, the benefit of our model of analysis is that it can be applied to any employer's social media policy. Social media policies that seek to control employee behaviour outside of work are vulnerable to legal challenge. Employers can issue directions through workplace policies and employees have to follow them. However, those directions must be lawful and reasonable, and workplace policies that reach too far into employees' personal lives and have no direct connection with their employment are not lawful and reasonable. In the future, we plan to work with other unions to educate employees about their rights, but also to encourage employers to review their social media policies when they reach too far into employees' personal lives.
Okay, I might first.
When I think of heroes, I have mental images of Cape Crusaders fighting crime or cave divers rescuing children from trapped caves. But never did I imagine that I would be regarded as a hero until one day in 2017, I received an email from a patient that had been referred to me. Natalie had lost hope about the prospect of getting better from a condition, a terrible disease, gastroparesis, a condition that can cause daily, intractable nausea and vomiting. Her sister Cass writes how Natalie found the appointment transformational, and she found newfound hope for the very first time. To me and to Cass, certainly she viewed me as a hero. Now, I am uncomfortable about the idea of being called a hero. It's not even part of my lexicon. But to see where Cass comes from, let me first introduce you to our research program. The research program that I lead at Western Sydney University has the key goal of improving the lives of patients who are most afflicted with difficult gut motility issues. Motility means movement. And so if you have a problem with motility, it means there's a problem with the gut movement. The patients that I specialize in treating have very severe diarrhea, constipation, nausea, and vomiting, to the point that some are on lifelong feeding tubes or are fed purely by an intravenous drip, or do not pass a bowel motion for 6 weeks. Established in 2011 and in partnership with the Southwestern Sydney Local Health District, we have had over 5,000 patients directly pass through our specialized UMCCC, the University Medical Clinics of Campbelltown and Camden Hospitals. Globally, through our engagement efforts with the general public, we've shared the results of our research with over 5.7 million readers, and it's been translated into 5 different languages. What makes what we do very unique is the fact that we integrate our clinical research directly into the management of our patients. Our current research projects include mapping the gastric electrical activity of the stomach, assessing the tolerability of patients, particularly with gastroparesis, to handle dietary fiber, and also measuring the pressures inside the esophagus. We provide this information to patients in real time, and they really appreciate the insights, the information that we give them has to say about the workings of their gut. Over the last 10 years, we have surveyed over 5,000 patients who have benefited from finding out in real time the outcomes of the research. Specifically, as their health outcomes improve, less nausea, less vomiting, more regular bowel movements, we find that their overall quality of life is improved. This work would not have been possible without our partners who have been critical in the promotion, the fundraising, and direct engagement with the work. For example, we know that the Devonport Rotary Club fundraised for 2 PhD gastroparesis scholarships, and they were lobbied by local sufferers who really rallied the whole community to fundraise for them. We know that the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation provided us an innovation grant, but also access to patients and donors with severe gastroparesis from type 1 diabetes mellitus. Additionally, the impact of our research extends to the learning of our medical students who attend our clinics. Our medical students, as you can see on my left-hand side and your right-hand side of the slide, benefit from being taught in real time on real patients, gut physiology, and they find that the information is helpful and really applicable to their learning. They also value the innovations that we provide them, such as 3D animations. I want to conclude by saying that I believe that research is forward-looking and ultimately about providing hope. And if I can transform the lives of many by giving them a healthier working gut, then to me, that's research that's very worthwhile. For me, research is not just aspirational, but should be inspirational. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Today is Dr. Olaide Ogunshiji, and she is from the School of Nursing and Midwifery, and the title of her presentation, as you can see on the slide today, is Beyond Illegality. What do we need to eradicate female genital mutilation?
Thank you. I will start with a direct quote from Fatimata, a 34-year-old woman living with female genital mutilation. That's my life. It's not a normal life. I was still full when my mother gave birth to me. But when something was removed from me, I'm not normal. Me, I will tell you, stop it. This is the ordeal of more than 200 million women and girls that are living with female genital mutilation, also known as female genital cutting or circumcision, all over the world today. It is associated with severe health consequences such as urine infection and complications during childbirth. In fact, a close friend of mine told me about how she almost died of severe bleeding when she had the procedure done in her early adolescent years. This ordeal has attracted global attention with United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5.3.2's determination to eradicate the practice by the year 2030. But please tell me, how can you eradicate something that you are not aware of? And that is why the question that my research has been asking in the last 15 years is, can you please tell me what you know about female genital mutilation? Currently, there is the problem of lack of awareness of FGM among Australian healthcare providers and the community generally. And using 3 Western Sydney University internal grants, my research explored the perspective of Australian midwives, primary healthcare providers, and circumcised women themselves. And circumcised women said that the Australian healthcare providers need to upskill themselves in providing care to them, while the Australian midwives and the primary healthcare providers acknowledge lack of pre-registration awareness of FGM. Both circumcised women and Australian healthcare providers are saying, making FGM illegal, it's good, but not enough. They identify the important role of awareness in the eradication and abandonment of the practice. Working together with colleagues, migrant resource centers and women's health centers, my research is making a social impact. Awareness and knowledge is increasing. In the first instance, topics from my research findings have been incorporated into nursing and midwifery curriculum, leading to more than 2,800 undergraduate students that are now aware of FGM. Through my research dissemination, the findings is conversation is increasing among Australian healthcare providers. We are working together with circumcised communities in order to know how to better protect their daughters from being circumcised. Not only this, I'm very proud to say that my research contributed to the recent Times Higher Education ranking for Western Sydney University's performance in their their ranking for the Sustainable Development Rating for gender equality. I'm very proud of that. And my research goes on even to contribute to Australian Institute of Health and Welfare's estimate about the number of women and girls that are living with FGM. Now we know that more than 53,000 women and girls living in Australia today are living with FGM. This research is now going to recognize with 4 awards within 2 years. In terms of the way forward, the plan is to work together with participating community or even practicing communities to ensure that they serve as advocates against the practice. We are also working together with healthcare providers to build their capacity through rolling out of education packages that will include the why, the how, and the health needs of circumcised women. This research promises important future cultural and economic future promise, in the sense that culturally, when participating communities wholeheartedly advocate against the practice, the culture around it is going to change. And that will lead to economic impact in terms of reduction in the financial cost of caring for circumcised women. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrido. And Dr. Garrido is from the School of Psychology. The title of her talk today is Music as Medicine, Not Just Entertainment for People with Dementia.
More than 10 million people worldwide are diagnosed with dementia every year, but the aged care systems that care for these people in Australia are in crisis. Aged care staff are under a lot of pressure. They're caring for multiple individuals with a high level of needs every day. And because of this, they sometimes feel the need to use drug treatments to help them manage some of the difficult, challenging behaviours and symptoms of the people that they're caring for. But this is not always a good outcome for the individuals with dementia. The research shows that side effects of some of the commonly used drugs like antipsychotics are severe. They can increase confusion. They can even result in death. The recent Royal Commission into Aged Care in Australia demonstrated that the need to reduce reliance on what they call chemical restraints is of primary importance in aged care in Australia. And so decision-making bodies around the world are recommending that non-pharmacological treatments should be a first line of defence in managing these symptoms. Now, music provides one such alternative to drug treatments. There's abundant evidence that music therapy involving a trained music therapist can reduce agitation, it can reduce depression, it can increase alertness and engagement and quality of life in people with dementia. But a study that my colleagues and I published in 2018 demonstrated that very few aged care facilities have access to a trained music therapist. And still fewer have access to one 24/7 that can help them manage symptoms as needed. So in that case, what about just listening to music when there's no trained music therapist available? Well, there's research that and evidence that indicates that this can be effective as well. But our study that we published in 2018, again, demonstrated that aged care facilities are interested in using music. They might have ABBA or Andre Rieu or something playing in the communal living areas, but they're not seeing the potential for music to be used as medicine. They're seeing it as a form of entertainment, and they don't necessarily have the knowledge to be able to use it as effectively as they could. So armed with that knowledge, we have developed a set of evidence-based guidelines to help aged care staff understand how they can use music as medicine, not just as entertainment. Because often the way they're using music at the moment, their intentions are good, but sometimes it can actually make people more agitated. I would certainly be agitated if I had to listen to ABBA too often. So these guidelines have been developed on the basis of several years of research that we performed, funded by the National Health and Medical Research Council, where we looked at how different features of music interact with the symptoms of the individual. And we've developed these in close collaboration with aged care providers, people with dementia, and their family members and caregivers. And what the guidelines do is they help caregivers to identify, firstly, individuals who might be vulnerable to a negative response. They help them to select music that is not only music that the individual likes, but that is targeted towards the particular symptoms that are challenging for that individual. And then it helps them to understand how to integrate music into the individual's daily care plan. Now, these guidelines are being used now in multiple aged care facilities across the country. They also form part of the toolkit of consultants from the Dementia Centre who advise the majority of aged care facilities across the country about improving care for people with dementia. We've developed training sessions in aged care facilities, at industry events with groups of home-based carers, and the caregivers themselves report that the music programs they're developing based on these guidelines are improving care situations like showering and washing people. People are eating better because they're calmer at meal times. And so it's improving quality of life for the individuals with dementia and their caregivers. We currently have funding to transform our guidelines into an online training program for aged care staff to help them really understand how they can use music most effectively and thereby increasing quality of life in people with dementia and their caregivers and reducing the reliance on pharmacological treatments. Thank you.
Much, Sandra. Just looking at Michelle Ryan. Michelle is from the School of Science. The title of her talk today, as you can see there, is Using Citizen Scientists to Confirm the Presence of Platypus in the northwest of Sydney. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Arguably the world's strangest creature. A bill like a duck, a tail like a beaver, and a mammal that lays eggs. For those of us who still use cash, we'll see the platypus every day on the back of our 20-cent piece. But for most of Australians, we will never see a platypus in the wild. They're an elusive species that lives in the east coast of Australia and in Tasmania. They're an iconic species. They're a reflection of a healthy ecosystem, and they make up an important part of the aquatic food chain. Traditionally, they were hunted for their fur, but in the 21st century, they face a new series of threats: drought, pollution, and like many of our Australian iconic species, habitat loss from urbanisation. Sydney is one of the most rapid developing urbanised areas in the world. The platypus population in Sydney is not well documented, not well studied, and it's considered that there are no platypus in the Sydney Basin. How can we protect an iconic species if we can't confirm their presence? We can't, and we wanted to change this. I worked with Cat Eye Hills Environment Network, who are a community volunteer organisation based in the Hills District in Western Sydney, an area that's experiencing rapid growth. They wanted to show that there were platypus in their area and that these platypus in their habitat were worthy of being protected. In order to conduct this research, I needed community members. So we put a call out in local media for people to report platypus sightings for us, and that's this middle picture here. We asked for people to let us know where they've seen platypus, and we had a great response from landholders who back onto creeks, but mostly fishermen who spend their time looking through the creeks of Western Sydney fishing. It was a really great way of getting people involved with that project. In order to take the samples, we recruited citizen scientists, so lay people who were interested in this project. We also used some postgraduate and undergraduate Western Sydney Uni students as well. We sampled over one weekend in June in the Hills District in Sydney. Because we were using lay people and people with non-scientific background, we needed to use really innovative and easy techniques. And we did. In the top picture at the top here, you can see a variety of members of the community taking samples. All they had to do was take a water sample, push it through a filter, seal it up, and bring it back to me. It was a really simple, innovative technique that they could be a part of. Allowing the Western Sydney community to be part of this project, allowing them to contribute for it, allow them to connect with the waterways, which means that they're going to protect, to work and advocate for the health of those water bodies. We were really excited to find that out of the 18 sample sites in this pilot study, we had 8 positive for platypus DNA. It was really exciting for us to find platypus DNA in these creeks, and we wanted to share that with all of Sydney and get Sydney excited. We wanted the wider community to be really excited that we had this iconic species in our backyard in Sydney. We wanted to use the platypus as an umbrella species, so a species that people will connect with in the waterways and therefore protect those waterways. This would lead to improved environmental outcomes for the waterways and all its inhabitants, not just the platypus. We achieved this through good science communication. We put out a press release and it was picked up by ABC News, which was really exciting for us. We were then asked to do a live interview on Breakfast Radio with Wendy Hammer and Robbie Buck, which was my first live interview, very scary, but great. And we had a really good response to that. In the lead up and after that, we were published in a number of news areas. So we were in local papers, The Land, as well as some US websites. Our media reach had a reach of over 23 million people. So we got some really good news for this. We all needed hope in the time of COVID, and the news of platypus in Western Sydney has been really widely celebrated. We were also really lucky that we are starting to form a partnership with Sydney Water. They believe that this is a really good narrative for them. You see, in lots of the creeks in Western Sydney, they discharge treated sewage effluent, and often that's seen as a negative. But for the platypus, this is actually a really good thing because it's keeping habitat in the times of drought. So I look forward to working with Sydney Water further down the track and helping this project shape the waterway management in the Sydney Basin. This project can also be used as a good template of citizen science projects, both nationally and internationally. Thank you.
Our second last presentation today is from Dr. Sebastian Falch. He's from the School of Social Sciences, and the short title of his talk today is Cooling Sydney.
Thank you, Kevin. My research impacts how we plan, build, and live in Sydney. My research also directly contributes to the Premier's priority of greening our city and to the United Nations SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. And I'm not saying this because I'm suffering from tall poppy syndrome, but I'm saying this because it's real. And in the next 4.5 minutes, I will try and explain to you why it is real. Climate change, urban densification, and greenfield transformation make our cities hotter. Ignoring this, we're still building cities like what you can see in image number 1. Treeless, greenless, very hot. We need more green infrastructure, not less. We can see in image 2 and 3 the profound effect that green infrastructure has on urban cooling. This is a green wall, and you can see in the infrared image in number 3 how much cooler plant surfaces, green surfaces are compared to hard surfaces around them. And I'm using this to, for example, help cooling down Parramatta. My work with Transport for New South Wales has resulted in the replacement of 1 kilometer of concrete track with green track. If you don't know what green track looks like, look at picture 4. Green track cools, but it also provides noise reduction and opens up the surface to allow rainwater to be seeped into the ground. And that again becomes plant available and helps further cooling. Now that is a practical example of how I use green infrastructure. I also drive policy change. The work that I've done with local governments here in Western Sydney has already resulted in changes in DCPs and LEPs of these local government organizations. Also, the central framework that will sit in the forthcoming Australian standard on green urban infrastructure is my work. I developed this, and it's an example of the very mature impact that my work has, because this document will sit at the top of the policy pyramid of Australia. Now, while these examples are all great and plants are great for cooling cities, there are limits when I want to use plants for cooling our city. And that's why I look at other opportunities. One is playgrounds, and image 5 shows you that it can get very, very hot in playgrounds, particularly when they're unshaded. I'm very happy to let you know that in 2 days, we are opening Australia's first UV smart cool playground here in Western Sydney, in Marylands in Memorial Park. Come along, it's a great site to see what can be done today. I also work on schools, and the image number 6 shows you a map where I collected empirical data in this school in Western Sydney and created this map. It is the air temperature distribution throughout the school at lunch break. Using this map, the school is now capable of providing a heat smart lunch break, because they can now advise activities to take place where it's hot, where it's cool, and limit the activities where it is actually hot based on empirical data we provided. I'm also interested in cooling down roads and car parks because they contribute massively to the urban heat island effect. And an ongoing project with 3 local councils looks at the transformation of roads and car parks into cooler roads and car parks by applying a seal code that you can see in image 7. This project is particularly concerned about nighttime temperatures and how providing these reflective surfaces can help nighttime temperatures to be lower in summer. There are also other projects that are forthcoming, but any of those projects can't be done without the partners. And that's why I put my partners for all these projects down at the bottom. I'm really privileged to be able to work with state and local government organizations, with industry, with non-for-profits, all interested in cooling our city. I also regularly communicate my work to media, and you can see in image 8, where I was interviewed by a team from the ABC on the playground before we started the transformation. And there will be television again on Thursday when we open the playground, so it will be widely covered. I also have my Cool Schools research featured on the Big Weather and How We Survive It ABC series, which you can see episode 2 tonight, which has the impacts of school learning inside the classroom and hot temperatures and what kind of effects you would expect on the learning outcomes in it. A recent meltwater analysis has indicated that my reach in the online medium has about 1 billion views just for 2020. And that takes place in 24 countries. So I hope I convinced you that indeed my work does change how we plan, build and live Sydney and beyond. Thank you.